right, we're in the old man workshop here with the old man. Come on, come on over here. You
gotta be in part of it.
Gotta get in shot.
Okay.
Some of the last videos that we did were some of the bigger tools that are in the shop, and there's a lot more of this that the old man does in the old man workshop, and some of it's a little more the fine detailed work, and there's a craft that he's involved with, and that's marquetry.
Right.
And there's some specific tools with marquetry, and involves some fine saws, some fine veneers that we'll show some shots of that in a little bit. But it's got a workbench, and it's not very mobile the way it's set up right now. And the old man, he does some vacationing, and he's out and about, and he's decided to come up with a more mobile workstation for his marquetry, and that's what we're gonna talk about today. So maybe just give a little bit of background on what inspired the idea of the construction of what we're going to look at here, and maybe how it was made, and the kind of the planning and the construction of what you did.
Okay. Well, basically speaking, what I wanted to do is simplify a kit or a jig, so I could travel with this jig and still get the same results of what I had before. And basically speaking, what we're talking about in marquetry is doing artwork with little pieces of wood that are glued together and to form a graphic of some kind. So, having said that, what I used to have was a very large jig, which was very heavy, and every time we went on holidays, it was very difficult to be able to move this thing around. So with one thing and another, I discovered there was a simpler way of doing it with much smaller tools, and to have a container that would put everything together so I could travel easily and lightly.
What kind of design work did you do when you developed this concept?
Well, there are a lot of small tools involved, and it was a question of getting them together in a compact container.
Okay.
And also to reduce the jig that I had before, which was fairly large, and there are much larger ones too. But the one I had was pretty simplified, but it was still too heavy, too big, and I want to be able to, wherever I go, if it's a cabin or even a motel room, I could have this little jig that I could screw to not screw, but clamp to a table to be able to do the work.
Okay. So from a design standpoint, did you start with a pad and paper? Is it in front of a computer? How did it all come about?
In all honesty, a lot of it was through research.
Okay.
Some people who have used different types of jigs, some which I thought were still a little too big, some I thought were a little too small, so I kind of combined everything together and came up with a solution that I thought would work.
All right, so the need was there, the desire
Right.
was there.
Right.
Did some preliminary research, narrowed down the design, knew all the things you wanted to put in your kit.
Correct.
Then it was basically pen to paper to come up with a concept.
Yeah,
and
a
that's
lot
what
of sketching.
A lot of sketching. How many sketches did you do?
Probably trial and error, probably maybe 25, 30.
25, 30 sketches.
Yeah, because a lot of it has to do with not only the jig itself, but the container.
Sure.
I wanted something that was strictly as much wood as possible, because that's my love and my passion.
Perfect.
Is wood,
Yeah.
and that's what we've come up with here.
All right. So as far as construction time is concerned, how much time did you spend actually cutting wood, assembly, and final fitting?
I would say probably about 16 hours.
16 hours total?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and a lot of it was primarily a lot of hours to work on how efficiently I can get it as compact as possible.
Okay. So when you say 16 hours, is that the design time and construction?
And construction, because the construction itself, if you have a good idea of what you're doing,
Yep.
because I've done this type of box before, the actual assembly of wood and resawing and so on and so forth is not that long.
Okay.
It's a question of making it as compact as possible and developing the right way to do it is going to be efficient
Okay.
for what the art is.
Sure. And then, but the assembly time and cutting of the wood was just a fraction of that. that
Yeah,
16
I'd say
16
about
hours.
a third.
Okay.
A third.
Okay, so maybe you can tell me a little bit about the features. Obviously, I'm going to do some other shots after of all the details of the construction. But maybe you can talk a little bit about the construction of the features of the box itself. You have a handle. You have some homemade hinges here, which are beautiful. Some simple materials. Maybe you can just comment on how it was put together and any jointery that you did with
Right.
the box itself.
Well, let's start with the box itself.
Okay, sure.
The box, because you have wood which normally bought or whatever is 3/4 of an inch thick, I didn't want to work with something that was that thick because number one, you'd have to make it too big, and number two, it would be too heavy.
Okay.
So what we do is what we call resaw. We take 3/4 inch pine or whatever
Okay,
wood,
that's gonna grab the
and we cut it down so it's 1/4 of an inch thick. And
Okay.
so that's basically what we come up with here. Okay, so basically speaking, you have the pine, which is the carcass of the box.
Okay.
It is all resawed, cut down to a thickness of 1/4 of an inch.
Okay.
You also have the handle, which is a little thicker, but it's custom made for this box. It's in cherry.
Okay.
It's a good solid wood, but it's got to have joinery, which is going to be solid.
Okay.
But we still had to resaw that down as well, so you didn't have a thickness of the wood. You also have the latch, which is
Maybe just move that here.
yeah, the latch, which is the front part, which also had to be resawed down to 1/4 of an inch.
Okay.
And then you have the back hinge, which is hinges which are also in pine, which have been milled or resawed down to 1/4 of an inch.
Okay, so I can see here you're using standard screws.
Correct.
This is the cherry here,
Right.
and then I can see the latch or the hinge
Right.
detail here. What's in between? What's holding that together?
Well, that's basically it's a system of dovetailing, even though it's more of a box joint type of cut, but it has to be cut precise. So when you hold it together to drill the hole for the actual hinge, which is
Yes.
a simple nail,
Okay.
you have to make sure that the joint here is precise, and that's generally done with a dovetail saw.
Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Now, ideally, it would be better if this was just glued on, which you could do as well, but because of time, I decided to use
Go with the
the screws.
Okay.
Okay, so as we said, it's a hinged in wood.
Mm-hmm.
It's a latch in wood. So basically speaking, hopefully you can see
Yeah,
that.
I think we're okay.
Okay. So this is basically the whole kit, and it boils down to the tools that I use to do the marquetry, which are all encased into this small little case,
Okay.
which have the drawers with all the different tools that I would need to do my marquetry.
Okay.
Now, to do the actual marquetry itself, you need a jig, which this is the jig here.
Okay.
And to be able to stabilize, I'll just close this here.
Yeah.
To stabilize the jig to a table, you have a C-clamp,
Okay.
which is part of the jig right now, but when you need it, you take it off and you clamp it to a table, which
Okay.
we can probably show you after.
Yeah.
And the actual tool that cuts the marquetry or the veneer to
Yes.
be able to make the little pieces of wood to do the art is based from this, what we call a fret saw.
Okay.
Last tool, which is glue. Actually, there are two things, but this is glue,
Okay.
which is what cements all those little pieces of wood
Together, yeah.
to be able to incorporate that piece of artwork that I showed you earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can have something that's very simple, but you can have also something very complex. Like for instance, that piece that I showed you a moment ago has about 450 to 500 pieces
Okay.
that you have to glue. So there are a lot of man hours involved.
That's 500 pieces. That's a lot of pieces.
Okay, and we place it onto the little stabilizer here, lock it into place.
Okay.
Okay, so then you, and the measurements naturally when you work on the design, and that's where the trial and error comes into play. You want to make sure that it's loose enough, but tight enough that everything fits in properly.
Okay.
So maybe I should talk about this a little more.
Yeah, let me just get a good shot. I don't need the camera set up, so there we go.
A lot of this here, again, because the movement of wood, you have to make sure that it's tight enough that you don't get a lot of wobbling around,
Sure.
but yet loose enough that it slides very easily.
Okay.
And normally you can achieve that by making the base a little wider, because if that does tighten up, you can always shave a little off and it'll still work for you.
Okay. So you're using, if I'm understanding that correctly, you're using this portion of the box as a strip for the actual friction fit.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. It's almost like a slide
Okay.
of a drawer.
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, there again, trial and error because of the different sketches, finding the appropriate way of getting all these tools in, so you can, they're accessible easily enough for you, and yet put a lot, because you've got so many different tools that are involved for the marquetry.
Okay.
So that's why I came up with this little design. Still needs
And
to
that just slides into the to the side of the box.
Yeah, you just. I'm in an awkward angle here,
Yeah,
but
it's okay.
there we go.
Slides in there.
Yeah, and it comes just about to the top of the lid,
Okay.
and then this slides in here on this side, and then you have the glue, which is your very important tool, because that's what cements everything together.
Okay.
And then basically that's it. You close. Well, actually, I do have the veneer itself, which will sit on an angle here,
Okay.
because I do have just a little more space, which is part of the
So it's storage as well.
storage as well. And then you just close the little sucker, and away you go. And
Perfect.
you can walk off. And ultimately, what I would like to do is cut a piece of marquetry that I would be able to incorporate in on top of the box.
So like an inlay.
An inlay
on top of the box here. Okay.
which is basically what the marquetry is all about.
Right.
It's inlay to embellish and make pieces of furniture beautiful.
So what would the process be to actually put an inlay in this? If you wouldn't cut right through this wood.
No.
So
No.
what would be the process?
No, because normally if you want to take a look at little pieces of wood,
That's a veneer.
where this is a veneer and this is the cutout, which is used to do this type of art.
Sure.
So once you get a piece of art in this form of veneer, what you would do is either with a mechanical or hand lathe, cut a circle or square or whatever you want to the box, the thickness of the veneer, and glue it in.
Okay.
Once it's glued in, good and firm, you hold it down with a clamp and a piece of wood. Once it's good and dry, then you just sand it down nice and smooth, and,
Okay.
and it becomes a piece of artwork.
Piece of artwork that would be incorporated into your travel marquetry box.
That's right, the travel marquetry box.
Yeah. All right.
Great, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.